this video, we're going to be going back and revisiting the NES Jason, the retro cloth version from the folks over at NECA Toys. For regular collectors or regular viewers of this channel, you'll know exactly how tall Jason stands. He stands at 8 inches tall because he's making use of the same retro cloth body as the other figures that we've looked at already. Continuing our looks at the retro cloth Jasons, this is, I guess, the last one in the series. We've already looked at part 6, we've looked at part 3, we've looked at part 5, and now we're having a look at NES. And he's actually a good looking figure. One of the things that I want to mention right off the bat is that the thing that this particular figure did well, that the plastic version of him wasn't very successful with, is the coloring. If you look at the NES Friday the 13th game footage, Jason actually comes across with this more closer being a color, as the accurate color, than when we end up getting with the actual figure version of Jason. In the game, it actually is more, it's hard to describe it, it's almost more like a grape purple versus what we ended up getting with the plastic figure. Now, just to show you what I'm talking about, you know what, actually we'll do a couple of comparisons first. There's the NES Jason, which is pretty much a recoloring of Part 3 Jason, which just so happens to be also the same figures as the Part 3 Jasons. So while these two figures are carbon copies to one another, the same thing can be said for the retro cloth figures as well. The Part 3 Jason is simply just painted here and slightly varied on the costume to give us the NES Jason. Now, I'm going to just move these guys out of the way. And I just want to show you the comparison between the two. Like, if you look at the game, Jason is closer to looking like this in the coloring than this here. I don't know why NECA didn't give him the same sort of grape purple. Instead, they gave him a slightly kind of bluish purple, which looks good, but it doesn't certainly have that vibrant pop that Jason has. And it certainly doesn't look like the game, quite like what the NES version has here. And we're going to go back to this guy in a second. I'll just move him out of the way. And we'll bring in back again the retro cloth Part 3 Jason. So yes, it is the exact same body, other than the fact that the different material, different colored material that they used for the slacks and the shirt. The only other thing, too, that the retro cloth NES Jason did differently is they changed out the buttons. Something a little bit more smaller and a little bit more, doesn't look as noticeably large than what the NES, or than the Part 3 Jason ended up having, where you had these big, giant buttons. This one had a much more acceptable sized of buttons here. But basically, the shirt is roughly about the same. Pants are roughly about the same, other than just your coloring. The hands are also carbon copies to one another, the boots and the head. But there's the head sculpt right there. I suppose they could have made the coloring of the head a little bit more, not neon, but a little bit more brighter, because in the game it's actually quite a very strong color that they use. It's really kind of hard to describe the color. I would say it's almost like a turquoise. Maybe like an aquamarine that they use. This one comes across a little bit more like pastel, like a pastel blue. But it is the same mask as the Part 3, other than just the coloring has been changed. And we can go ahead and take the mask off. There we go. And you'll see that they didn't really put a lot of paint. And by a lot of paint, they didn't put any paint on the head underneath. And we'll just put him right there. We'll take the mask off this one. And again, you can see the same, the head sculpt is the same from both figures. And just for giggles, we'll put NES Jason right there. We'll bring in, now this is the re-release Jason, so it doesn't have the translucent mask, or again, any of the areas that are blue would have been more of a see-through plastic. Go ahead and take the mask off. And one thing I really like is that the updated release of Jason, which I've already done reviews of this guy, so you can always go back and watch the full review if you'd like. but this one does have some much needed black outlining there, like panel outlining, and then you've got the very bright, almost pinkish orange eyes. This one could have easily used some of that because he just kind of gets lost amongst just the mold of the plastic. Like there's not really a lot just to bring out some of those details that this one does quite a bit better. So it does have pros and it does have cons. This one has a much more accurate color to the NES game, but this one has a much more, well, some additional panel lining, which really brings out some cool details in the sculpt. Move that out of the way. All right, so let's go ahead and put the mask back on Jason. And because, again, he is the exact same figure as this one here, he also shares the exact same accessories as well. So, for example, Part 3 Jason had your machete. NES Jason, if I can actually grab it, has the exact same machete, though unfortunately a little warped, I have to admit. But it is the same machete, now just painted in white and brown to match that of the game. I just have to warp that and try to get that back into place. So, same machete. Grab the axe from NES Jason, which is in fact as well the exact same axe. Makes sense probably doing it this way. Same axe as the Part 3 Jason. Very minimal paint, I have to also mention too. Like they really scaled it back, but again in the game, he doesn't really have a whole lot of details to him, especially like the weapons, so they're very bare minimum. And lastly, one thing as well that he does come included with is the harpoon gun. Now adequately, this figure could have easily just came with a machete or possibly just an axe. Didn't even really need to come with the harpoon gun, but again they had stockpiled the molds, so why not incorporate the same accessories as the Part 3 Jason. Okay. When it comes to your posability, we'll just move this guy out of the way. You've served your purpose, Retro Cloth Part 3 Jason, thank you. I appreciate that. When it comes to your posability on this guy, it's exactly the same as all the other Retro Cloth Jasons, and really for that matter, the Retro Cloth figures as a whole, because they are making use of the same body. Let me just show you what I mean. Now this one ridiculously is all painted in purple. I guess for a mold standpoint, there's no sense in painting any of this. You just cast the same figure just in the all purple. It's exactly how he looks in the game, so why not? But you can kind of see like there is no torso crunch. He does have the waist swivel though. And most of the posability really is in the arms and in the legs. And we'll just close up the Velcro here. I do really, again, like that it's Velcro and not snaps. Snaps would make it a much bigger, bulkier build. That's a lot of B's. Velcro keeps it nice and clean, and if you can do a good enough job of hiding it, then you won't also see it there. The shoulders hinge outward, forward and back, but I mean, it gets a little tight, a little snug up within the shoulder area there, but you can rotate it. You just have to kind of keep working away at it. But the arms do move forward and back. Doesn't seem to have a bicep swivel, but you do get your bend in the elbow and a rotation in the hand. It's, as mentioned, he's already got the waist swivel. Forward and back on the legs, a split out, a thigh swivel, hinge at the knee, and a hinge in the foot. I suppose the only other thing I would say that I wish these figures had was better articulation in the feet. Unless you have the feet completely flat, if you slightly, like if you move the legs outward, for example, I wish that they had an ankle pivot so you can actually have rotated the feet, because what you end up getting is you get this angled arch on the feet and they don't properly always stand. So a lot of times you may have to stand them closer together, or you can just take your chances of spreading out the legs. But again, you get this kind of weird angled out on the feet there. But there is Retro Cloth NES Jason. Not one of my favorites, but I dig NES Jason. You know, kind of how I feel when it comes to NES Jason. So for that reason, I like the figure. And one thing, again, that this figure did better than this figure here is the coloring. I wish this coloring, if you could just kind of extract it somehow with a $45,000 machine, extract the color and plank it on this one, this would be a much better looking Jason. So that's one thing that this guy did well, that this guy could have learned a little bit from. He had the panel lining, which was nice, but he was still missing the mark, I think, with an accurate game color scheme, which this one does definitely have. Today, once again, we were revisiting the NECA Toys NES Jason, the retro cloth version. If you guys like this video, certainly hit it with a like, and down below, you'll also see there's a little bell, so make sure you turn that on, activate that, check off the box, do all your stuff down there where you can turn on the notifications, so any new videos that come onto this channel, you'll be able to see them. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you next time.